Hi, everyone, and thanks for connecting with us. This is VC Insights with Nguyen and Sony Mayugba from Spero Ventures. So this is being recorded. We'll send an email out with a link once the recording is ready. Feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the chat. If you're feeling it, turn your cameras on for a more engaging experience. This is series called VC Insights, for conversations with venture capitalists, so we can learn what they look for in companies to fund and how they spot the best talent. Where we get advice. And I'm passing the mic on to you, Anish.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. So my background, it was, my previous life was actually running kind of marketing and growth for different companies, both full-time and as a consultant. Spent 11 years in San Francisco, moved to New York about 3 years ago. And then 7 years ago, actually began recruiting for clients with the whole idea that people who have practitioning knowledge within, let's say, marketing, product, analytics, design, growth, we'd be a better fit to recruit for companies than someone who's never done the jobs themselves before. So we try to integrate really deeply with our clients in order to help them hire kind of the best people out there. Most of our clients tend to be somewhat in the tech ecosystem and somewhat in the startup ecosystem. So that's also part of why we're so excited to speak with Ha and Sonny today, because obviously that's the world they operate in as well.
Great, now it's to Sonny.
Please don't tell me you're going to read all those paragraphs. That's too long.
You can introduce yourself.
Oh, I introduced myself. Okay. Hey, well, hi, everybody. Thanks to everyone in the community who's joined this and who are still joining. Thanks to Bring Ruckus for having Ha and I here. Super excited and totally grateful and honored to be here. I am an entrepreneur in residence, and I am an entrepreneur and have been my entire life. I love building things, probably something we all have in common. And I love starting things. So currently I'm the EIR at Spero Ventures. And what I do there is really work with getting my hands dirty, rolling up my sleeves with our portfolio companies on strategic objectives and operational plans and strategy and just getting things done. I work with Ha and the team on diligence and looking at new companies that we're thinking about that fit our thesis. And then I get to do really fun things like this with Ha, where we talk to the community and talk about Spero and what we stand for.
Awesome. We also have Ha.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, it's so awesome to see some of my friends on the call. So hi, Anna and Cynthia and Shraddha and Jared. Awesome folks. So great to have you guys here. So my background, and I guess I'll start with my tech journey. So I moved over to Silicon Valley in 2000. I worked at 5 early stage startups. The last 4, I led product and design at those startups. And then about 4 years ago, I moved over into the world of venture. First as an EIR at Omidyar Network. And then I became an operating partner 6 months in. And then 2 years ago, I, along with my partner, Priya Mahesh, spun out of Omidyar Network to form our own venture firm called Spero Ventures. And I can share a little bit about Spero Ventures. We're an early stage venture capital firm that invests in the things that make life worth living. And that is founders who are building startups that are both purpose-driven and can scale to become billion-dollar companies. So we have a small early stage fund. I eventually then started also becoming an investing partner as well. So I've sort of seen the gamut. I've done a bunch of different roles. So happy to share my experiences.
Awesome. So let's get started with the questions.
Cool. And before we dive right into sort of our pre-created list of questions, obviously a lot has changed in the world over the last week or two. There's a lot of emotions flying around, and there's a lot of people within the startup community who feel like they're disenfranchised. I know both Sonny and Ha, you guys both have a lot of experience within kind of different underrepresented communities. Your organization as a whole helps to support them. But I'd love to hear from both of you guys, because I know there's recent experiences with both of you that you can kind of touch upon to sort of address everything happening in the world, and as it pertains to kind of business, economics, anywhere in between. Sonny?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Anish. And I'm glad you brought it up. A lot has changed since we first started talking about doing this talk, right? Swiftly, but a lot hasn't changed as well. But hopefully this is an inflection point, and first off, my heart goes out to the family of George Floyd and everybody affected by this, in a very meaningful way. And, it's been interesting. I'm in Sacramento, California, which is turning out to be a ground zero of protesting, which has been mostly a beautiful thing. That's been very peaceful, very meaningful, with a very important message getting out to the world on what needs to change for human rights, for civil rights, which are most important. As it relates to the world that Ha and I play in, we're both underrepresented from where we come from, right? We've been doing some good work in the last 20 years of our lives, but, I grew up a mixed race, single mother. My mom was a single mother of one of 12 kids who was a fruit picker, whose father emigrated from just 2 generations away, immigrated here to the United States in the 40s, who was a dark-skinned Pacific Islander. And you can imagine how that went not so well, and Ha will tell her story. So, we've seen a bit of adversity, nothing like what we've seen recently. And, I just really hope that our community and our world comes together to make actual meaningful change. It's interesting. Like all of us, were on different email lists, and I got an email from the CEO of 23andMe. I don't know if anybody out there got that. And it was pretty fascinating to see. And she essentially just said, and I'll forward it around if anybody wants to see it, or I'll post a photo of it. She essentially said, "We've done a poor job. There are no African Americans at director level or above at this company." That's a big company. None. That's abominable, right? It's not a coincidence. But I appreciate her admitting it. And I appreciate her exposing that to the public and saying, we're going to change. So out of this incredible tragedy, maybe this is the one. Maybe we see real change happen for real this time. And I hope so.
Yeah, over the weekend, there was this juxtaposition for me where, like, on Saturday, I was floating on cloud 9, celebrating my 19th anniversary with my husband and my family, and, feeling peaceful and happy and sheltered in the burbs of the Bay Area. And then Sunday morning, I checked the news and I checked Twitter, and it was just chaos, and it was heartbreaking and troubling, it compelled me to put up a post on LinkedIn, but all afternoon I was slacking with my partner around, like, what could we be doing here at Spero Ventures. So just a little bit about my background, my story. Like, I am a refugee immigrant from Vietnam, so I wasn't born here. I came here as a refugee, grew up poor in rural Pennsylvania, I think in the heart of Trump land, honestly. Really, I just feel so lucky and blessed to, like, be able to kind of get out of my situation and eventually end up in the Bay Area after school. But I've always considered myself like an outsider. I didn't grow up like, having the mentors or the access or the networks as others have had. And so I've kind of devoted my whole career in terms of, like, helping and mentoring underrepresented either founders or leaders or individuals in tech. So I'm on the board of Women in Product. We are an 18,000 female product manager community that is there to support each other and celebrate each other's successes. I co-lead a VP of product group that is, a few hundred members strong. And at every single event that we have, we're committed to having 50-50 diverse representation of male, females, and 15% African-American, Latino, all the way through speakers to attendees, and so we're committed to that. At Spero Ventures, we have a carve out of our fund to invest in diverse founders earlier. I'm committed to writing more checks into not just female founders, but African American, Latino. So if you have an awesome founder, please send them my way. And welcome them to all of our events and into our Spero community. Shapri and I were talking over the weekend that we are going to hire a summer associate who is from one of those underrepresented communities, and I'm not talking just about a female, but we're going to do more. So I think if everybody does their part, I think we will hopefully move towards a more just, fair, and equitable society. But I think we all have to just step up, listen, and commit to action. I think that's the only way that this world changes.
Absolutely. Thank you both for diving into that. And obviously our roles, my company's role is focused on hiring people into senior level kind of opportunities that are high paying and are great kind of career roles for quite a few people. And, I see firsthand what happens when someone doesn't hit the kind of cultural, quote unquote cultural fit marks of getting into a lot of these companies, right? You need to talk a certain way, dress a certain way, look like the founder, act like the founder. And, very frequently, like, let's say you even have an accent on you that's not, an accent that's not Western European. You're gonna definitely get knocked a few points in almost probably every interview cycle. I have another talk later on today. I'm doing a second one of these later on today on someone else's point, where all we talk about is the experiences we've had within that, where, one of the smartest people in customer acquisition and digital marketing that I know, he has an Indian accent, and, he's been asked within interview processes, like, whether he can improve on that, whether he can learn to speak. He was asked whether he can learn to speak more American and stuff like that. So, you see all these things pop up consistently, and, there is a lot that we can all do. And I think a lot of it is beyond posting on social media. But also when companies do post on social media and say that they're kind of interested in helping out however they can, forcing them to actually do something and forcing them to actually say, well, hey, you posted that really great image on LinkedIn or on Instagram. Here's exactly how you can help. Now, so it's important to kind of take advantage of this moment right now and make sure that while it's happening and in the middle of it, instead of, months from now when all of that sentiment is going to cool down, maybe it will. Obviously, no one can predict the future. But if the past is any kind of indication, there is a chance that it could slow down. So making sure to push companies and utilizing your access. Obviously, Ha and Sonny are both people with immense access. We have access to founders as well. So, and people who can make hiring decisions. So just being able to utilize that as best as possible. And, I ask all the 49 people on this call, think about the access you have and how you can push people in, at times, uncomfortable situations that are uncomfortable for them, but lead to positive outcomes. So yeah, this is a good week to do that if you haven't yet. Cool. So now we will get into we have about 9 questions here that were sort of crowdsourced from all the people who registered for this event. And overall, you see that title EIR really frequently. Generally, it's meant for people who work within a venture capital firm or a venture wing of a big company. And I myself, at least personally, don't really understand what it means. Is it a VC? Are you just kind of a consultant? Like what? Maybe both. Both Ha, you previously were in EIR. Sonny, you are now currently in EIR. So I'd love to learn the details of, what is it and what has been your experience in learning? What does it even mean?
So let me start with this one, and I'd love for Sonny to share his experiences. So actually EIR a little bit misleading in that there are two different forms of EIRs. So there's the entrepreneur in residence track, and then there's the executive in residence track. And then, shortened, they're both EIR. So entrepreneur in residence track, historically has been inviting a entrepreneur, oftentimes, who's seen some level of success or an exit, who is trying to figure out what to do next, what company to start up again, into the firm, and, sometimes, there's been a pre-existing relationship with that firm. So maybe the VC had invested in the entrepreneur before and was happy with, that exit, or at least that first exit. And so invites the entrepreneur into the firm to hang out, for 6 months to 12 months while they're incubating their idea. And oftentimes with the optionality at the end of that sort of period to fund the entrepreneur. So that is sort of the historical entrepreneur in residence track. There's also the executive in residence track. And so good examples of that might be Casey Winters, who was an EIR at Greylock, or my friend Chris Sakalakis, who was an EIR at Benchmark. They hadn't started companies before, but they were senior leaders and executives at their companies that have seen some level of success or scale, and the venture firm has had some experience, working with the executive in residence, maybe as a board observer in some of the board meetings, and that executive is at a crossroads, trying to figure out what to do next, and happy to have a place to land. They get invited by the VC firm to come in and join, and the expectation there is, you have some expertise, whether that's in product, whether that's in growth, or maybe some other areas. We have a portfolio of companies who need that help and that expertise, so come in and help our companies, and teach them what and teach them how to fish. And, all the while you get to hang out, in our offices, back in the day when we went to offices, you get access to our business cards, and hopefully you get to sit in on some of the deal meetings and learn about the world of venture and learn about the world of investing. So those are the two different tracks. I'll pause there, and have Sonny kind of share his experience, because I can go on about my experience, but I think it's interesting to hear about Sonny's experience as an EIR with Spero Ventures.
Right now, came in a little bit of both. Most recently, I was a founder. I've been a founder pretty much my whole career, but I founded a food tech app that started out with the team, and we ended up through a string of events growing that company into a $308 million exit and then taking it public on NASDAQ. So the founding team was there from napkin stage all the way to NASDAQ, and you learn a lot of, when you do things, you learn those things, right? So was a founder and also doing what Ha described, which was being and doing the work. Well, what do you want to do next? And it was exactly what she just described. I was like, God, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I gave her a vague answer, like, I really want to take all this skill I've learned and all my, gray hair years of experience and apply it to a really great mission. Sounds pretty vague, right? I meant it. She goes, it sounds a little bit like you want to be an EIR. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, EIR. She goes, no, an executive in residence. I'm like, what's that? So she says, idea.
Hey, Sonny, is everybody having issues with Sonny's audio?
Yep.
Hey, Sonny, I don't know if you can hear me, but I think
Really
we're having
cool discussion.
issues with audio.
With my audio?
Yeah, with your audio for change.
I think your Wi-Fi just might have turned real spotty for 30 seconds there.
So lame. Right on the joke part of my story.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's my bad. I have fiber too. Is it not doing well? How about now? Are we guys good?
You're actually much better now.
Okay, my apologies. So not sure what we lost there, but anyway, it was the story of how I ended up being an EIR, which was pretty funny. And you're on mute, huh?
Oh, give the 1 minute lowdown again, because I think we did lose you. So just give the quick summary. So,
Shit, it cut out. Give the what summary?
sorry, give the quick 1 minute summary, because I think we did lose you throughout your
Oh,
story.
did we? Okay.
Yeah.
The 1 minute summary was that Haas sent me out to figure out what is EIR. I went out, I couldn't find anything online. And when we came back, I said, I couldn't find anything. It was much funnier the first time I told it. But anyway, so what she asked me a really poignant question, which is, and actually Shreya asked me a really great question, which is, what is it that you want to do and how would you be happiest? And that got me really thinking. And Ha and I ended up in a really good discussion. I said, let me go first, because I don't want you to go first. Because she goes, I have a vision of what it could be. But why don't you go first? And so I did. And really how I describe it is you're really joining the VC firm to do exactly what Ha said. You get to take your experience of being a founder and being, who haven't been down that road yet. That is just really powerful because you've done it. And when they hit you with their challenges or objectives they want to achieve, you actually know where it's going to go and they haven't seen it yet. So coaching them on sales strategy, product strategy, marketing strategy, and actually operational and tactical plans and helping connect those dots is really powerful. And then being able to sit at the table with Ha, Shreya, Sarah, Mark, Stephen, Jonathan, this team of brilliant minds with tons of experience, and actually be around traditional venture capital and look at how the firm works in terms of looking at the thesis of the firm, companies that are coming in, the founders. I mean, it's a matrix company with a check and fund a founder. It's really fantastic. So seeing that on the front lines is really cool too.
Awesome. And with that, so it sounds like your role is very much affiliated with, once someone is a portfolio company, then you do a lot of work with them to just essentially help, sort of like a really ingrained consultant almost, and helping them operate their company much better. Is that kind of an okay summary?
No, that's really fair. I mean, yeah, you can liken it to you're like a guest board member. You're a super advisor. That's exactly how I look at it. And you get to work with real founders on their challenges. It's amazing.
Awesome. And does that, with that role, are you looking at deal flow as well, or are you really only focused on companies that are already a portfolio company, and then you go and help them operate better?
Yeah. So yes, the short answer is yes. I get to look at deal flow and look at diligence with the principals of the firm. That would be a little lower on my priority list, but it's something that I get to have a front seat at and it's something that, it's a new role as a founder. You're not on that side of the desk or that, at that table. So it's really, when you look at where you want to go and how you want to help companies and help the mission, it's a great place to be.
Awesome. Thanks for digging into that. Let's jump into the next one. Here's a really good one. What has been the most challenging part of your transition to EIR? And I think we can also, and for those on this call that don't know, Ha started, as an EIR and then transitioned into, growing into sort of, I don't know if it's growing actually, just transitioned into necessarily being a full-time VC. So I would include that in the question as well. What's been the most challenging part of your transition to EIR, and then also, what's been the most challenging part of transition into VC in a more traditional sense as well?
Sure, I'll start. So I think it's two things. As I mentioned before, my career, 16 years, has been spent as a product leader, different Silicon Valley, early mid-stage startups. And as a product leader, I mean, what you're doing is you are building things, right? So, so you're building a product, you're shipping it, there's deadlines, you're getting market feedback, you're iterating on the product, you're looking at the analytics, you're working with stakeholders, you're trying to understand customer problems, and so you really feel a sense of accomplishment, right? Like you're getting stuff out the door, and you feel pride when when it's working, and then if it's not working, you get a chance to fix it. Venture is not at all building, right? So like Sonny said, right? So you will actually do a very bad job in this role if your expectation is that you're going to go in to a company and help them fix their problems by rolling up your sleeves and fixing it for them. That's not what the founders actually want from you. Like they're going to understand their businesses much better than you do. They're going to understand what they've tried, what's worked, what hasn't, what their customers have told them, etc. But they don't have the experience that you do, and so they do want you to be a coach to them almost. So it is really, I think that's the right word. If your expertise is marketing, then you're a marketing coach. If your expertise is product, you're a product coach. But really, it's also broader than that, right? So it's, business leadership coaching. It's executive coaching, because a lot of these founders are young and first-time founders. Sometimes it's really just being a friend or a colleague, where they can like share their most intimate, and darkest moments with you with no judgment. And so that is one difference, is sort of just the building and actually getting shit done, and then your role as an EIR as a coach, more than sort of building. And then the second sort of, I think, key difference for me, at least when I made the transition, is it really is not a team sport in venture. So Sonny may or may not disagree, because we try to like bring him in, but for the most part, you could go the entire week without talking or seeing your partners or other team members of the firm, right? So we might get together on Mondays, or we often get together on Mondays to talk about deals. But outside of that, we're all going out, doing our own thing, sourcing deals, speaking at events, evaluating our deals. We're writing, whatever it might be, but it's very rare that we work with others in the firm. A little bit, we might collaborate on certain things, but it is definitely not a team sport. So those were the two big differences that I saw. And so it's something that I know if many of you on the call are thinking about maybe career transitions and whether venture would be something that would be interesting to you. Venture sounds sexy, and sometimes it is, but it's not always that way. And if you are a builder and you love building, it may or may not be the right role for you. So just something to think about. So off to Sonny if he has anything to add.
Well, I'd like to dive into one thing you sort of touched upon right there, and then I'll pass off to Sonny, I promise. But that's actually the first time I've heard that VCs don't really work that collaboratively within a firm, and so that's really great insight. So to that vein, would that also mean, as you make the transition from, let's say, your background and C-level product roles into VC, that there isn't really training, that you sort of jump in and there's not going to be someone who's sort of looking over your shoulder too closely, and you sort of have to just sink or swim?
That's 100% true. So actually, what's interesting about an EIR role, as Sonny said, like there is nothing out there in the in the internet, that sort of describes the role of an EIR, what you're supposed to do, what does success look like. Whereas like you can go to any product conference, any product website and learn like what makes a successful PM, what is the role, like, how can you do your job better, right? And so it really is like, you got to figure out, like, first and foremost, like what does that venture capital firm need most from you right now? And how can you add value to that VC firm without anybody telling you what to do? Like, you got to just figure it out on your own, right? And actually, I would say that, confidentially, and I've talked to many EIRs, like some of them were not successful in their roles. Like some of them kind of like came in expecting the partners to invite them in, to founder discussions and to the Monday meetings and kind of like, tell them kind of like, here's like the goals and here's the plan. If that was what you're expecting when you land, you may not be successful in the role, because oftentimes partners don't have that time to do the coaching, do the training. So really, I do think, I think my early stage startup background made me perfect for my EIR role, and that, like, you know what, like, there is no roadmap. You know, I got to just figure this out myself. I got to figure out, like, you know, if the venture firm is my customer, what does that customer need? And how can I be most helpful to my customer and deliver value, and just figure it out, you know, without being asked or told what to do. And so that was how I approached the role. And I think that that's how I found success in the role.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Thanks for that. And does that
is
speak to
spot
both
on.
Sorry, does that speak to both EIR and VC? And does that speak to both small firms and larger firms, do you think?
Yeah, I would say that it does. I mean, certainly if you're coming in as a partner into a venture firm, you know, the expectation there is a little bit different than EIR, in that, like, you got to come and be sourcing deals. You know, like, you got to be bringing in deals into the firm, and you got to have, you know, the right combination of data, gut instinct to figure out the pick, right? Like, how to evaluate companies. And nobody's going to train you how to do that. Like, you know, it's that combination of your experience and your network that's going to, you know, come in and add immediate value to the firm. So that, you know, so if you're not, as an investing partner, if you're not good at deal sourcing and the deal pick, like, you know, you may not have a long career at that firm. Now, if you're coming in at a lower level, like as an associate or, you know, senior associate or principal, you know, there may be a little bit more training, right? Because you got partners that you're working with who can kind of coach you in terms of how to do the role successfully. So.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Sorry. And Sonny, you had some thoughts there as well?
No, it's, you know, I'm currently in my role, and I'm just resonating with everything Ha's saying. You know, it's the challenge people should be thinking about is, because a lot of people do come from having been a founder, is you're going to go wide on many, not deep on one. That's really probably, you know, it's a challenge for people to, you know, when you're, to Ha's point, if you are the head of software engineering, you're working on your product for your company deep for 3, 5, 7 years, right? Here, every week, you're looking at hardware, emotional intelligence software, you know, packaging, telemed, fintech, consumer marketplaces, and analytics software platform, sales enablement, you know, education. I mean, like, you're looking at that kind of stuff every week, and you need to sort of like try to get as deep as you can in a subject as quick as you can. So that's a challenge, you know, and it's a fun challenge, right? And then, yeah, as the EIR role, to Ha's point, you know, you do need to come in and kind of go look at it a little bit like a startup and say, how am I adding value this week? You know, what did I accomplish this week that was meaningful and good? And that may move next week. You know, it's going to be something a little bit different, or maybe more of the same, but it's ever changing. And the key is to be thinking of it that way. Like, what value am I adding? What accomplishments can I point to this week?
Amazing. Thanks for that. So yeah, just to kind of summarize, like, you just got to shorten the time span a little bit, right? If you're to your sort of example of being a director or head of software engineering, you might have a couple of years to build an amazing product. You know, with what you guys are doing, it's just, you've got to really shorten the span. If something is really long term, it might not be the right use of your time at that moment. So that's really, really helpful. Thanks. Next one, as an operator, what skills and attributes can I develop now to help me align to a career as an EIR or VC?
I'm going to let Sonny take that one because it's too easy for me to talk first.
No, I mean, you've been through all this, Ha, so I like when you kind of pave the road. It makes it easier for me. But yeah, I'll give you my perspective on this one. What skills and attributes? I mean, you know, number one, I can't emphasize this enough, is listening. You know, if you're a founder or an operator, you tend to have your opinions and your bias, and you want to come in and sit down and go, I'm awesome, I'm smart, I'm good, I'm talented, let me go, right? And you got to listen. Like, it's so important. You need to listen. I
think we lost Sonny. Is that it? Okay?
Okay, I know. Yeah, I said I've learned so much in the last 2 months at Spero that it would have been very easy for me to have predisposed opinions on, right? Just really easy, right? You're like, oh yeah, I've seen this. Oh, I've done this. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Oh yeah, where you've got like a really important skill is listening, um, and then that speed to that speed really. I mean, I would say speed. Navigate what needs to be done. How can I help? Not just adding value, but where can I help? And then, focusing on those things and having the ability and discipline to not fall into the trap of, oh, I just want to be the hot guy who attracts deals or brings in a sexy founder or those types of things. How can I help is a really important attribute.
Yeah, I think that's right. A couple things to add. One is empathy. So I think the reason why VCs love to bring on past founders and past operators, into this role is because you've been there. You've lived the journey. And so you bring that credibility, when you're put in front of a whole portfolio of founders, who like haven't done it before, but you have. So it's not just experience though. It is really that empathy of like, look, I get it. Like I have been in your shoes. I've done this, I've gone through the highs and experienced lows, and I've gotten, like my lifetime of like no's and rejections, from investors, from customers, from employees. So I totally get it. I hear you, and the journey is hard, and, and it's not easy, but here's kind of, how we figured this out, or here's the experiments that we ran. And so I think just having that, credibility and empathy and experience, I think goes a long way.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, you can look at a startup, you can look at a founder's journey more than just numbers kind of on a balance sheet. You can understand the inner workings of what's going on with them probably better than someone who's not actually done that before and can't necessarily step in their shoes. So that's really great. Yeah, I think I think both of you guys maybe gave a little bit of background on this in your kind of earlier bio. Do you think there's anything extra to add into this question, or should we just move on to the next one?
I'm good. So it's up to Ha. Yeah.
I think we've already touched upon this.
Yeah, we're good.
This is fascinating, and I think it really. I think there's a lot of codified language also that goes into the quote unquote typical VC profile to definitely address in both good and really terrible things I've heard from VCs who've talked about the typical VC profile or even the typical founder profile. So I think this is a really good one. So how can I get into VC? Is there a typical VC profile, characteristics, background, or Myers-Briggs?
Sonny,
sounds like you want to go first.
No, actually I was pointing at you. This is so right. This is Ha can answer. I mean, my only thing I would say here, and this is from just my perspective, is, be atypical, listen a lot, but be atypical, and, be unique. And definitely, I mean, Myers-Briggs is interesting you bring that up. Definitely understanding your communication method and others' communication method is powerful in any role in the world. But this is a good question for Ha.
Okay, so I think it's a two-part question. So the first question is actually how can I get into VC? So I'll address that first, and then I'll address the second part of the question. So how can I get into VC? So I think there's two paths, right? So the first path is the typical path, and that path is you know a VC really, really well, and they have experience in working with you, seeing what you're all about, like having, maybe partnered with you in your journey, whatever that journey was, right? Whether it was entrepreneur or executive, but they got to see you in action. So that there's a path is one where, and this is the typical path, unfortunately, that's where you get invited into the VC firm because they know, they have that experience and they know that you're going to be awesome, and so you get invited in that way. That's hard, that's a harder path to follow because there's a little bit of luck involved. But, if that's the path, right? Like, I think that the lesson there is, do what you can to get that exposure to your venture investors, right? So like, if you're an executive at a startup, like, can you sit in on those board meetings? Like, can you contribute, but not in a disruptive way to the conversation? Can you, reach out from time to time and grab coffee with your VC board member, right? Like, build that relationship, and don't be invisible. And obviously if you're a founder, it's easier because they've invested in you and they've gotten to spend a lot of time with you. But just really think about building those relationships up front, because those are the relationships that will hopefully pay off dividends down the road. The second path, I think, is a harder path, but like Sonny and I never worked together before I invited Sonny into Spero Ventures to become an EIR. But that second path, right, is like, if you think about what adds value to VCs and what they're looking for, then you can start thinking about like the types of activities that you can be doing now, right? So number one, what do they care about? They care about deal flow. So the more you can connect yourself with founders and be immersed in the founder ecosystem and be part of different founder communities, that can only help, right? Like, because then you have already built, a network of founders and relationships with founders, right? And that can be anything. That could be being an advisor to startups. That could be angel investing in startups. That could be maybe volunteering at an accelerator and applying your skill set to that accelerator. But like, the more you can connect yourself with, what's called deal flow, I think the more that will help. And then on the other front, I think it's what I think most people in this call are doing all the time, which is like building your functional domain, or your industry knowledge, or whatever expertise, right? Because that expertise and that knowledge will be valuable to a VC firm. You just have to make sure that like they know about it, right? And so my expertise was product. I know that I hope I'm helpful to my portfolio companies, when it comes to the world of product. And I do bring 16 years of that credibility and expertise there. But I would say that the one thing I didn't do that, like, in hindsight, maybe I should be doing, especially if you're thinking about a career in VC, is like, start writing about like your knowledge or expertise, right? Like, you have knowledge and expertise that needs to get out into the world, and you can start building your personal brand around it. So start writing, go and start speaking, right? Like, build that personal brand. And I think about like Casey Winters, that's kind of how he did it, right? Like, so not only did he work at amazing companies like Grubhub and then Pinterest, but all the time he was writing, he was speaking, he was being helpful to startups. And so when Greylock found out about him, they're like, yeah, Casey, come hang out with us, right? So I feel like I'm gonna stop speaking and leave the second question to Sonny. So.
What do you mean, second question? The typical profile? I think you just.
Yeah, I think the answer here is like, there is no typical profile, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I think there's no typical profile. Some people get lucky and they get into VC. Others end up, like myself, starting their own venture firm. And that could, you could be an extrovert, you can be an introvert, you can, be a thinker, you could be a feeler, you could be any number of those different profiles. And they're all needed in the world, right? Like, you need diverse VCs to bring different perspectives, to be investing in different things. Like, I would say, I would hate for all VCs to look the same. So that's my
Yeah, totally agree.
I mean, speaking to that, I mean, I think one of the big takeaways I took away from what you mentioned, Ha, was that relationships really matter. And I think if you're going to go far in any career, you know, it can be difficult to just focus on your day-to-day job and not make relationships to the left, right, and above and below you, and make relationships outside of whatever organization you're in, and just continue to grow those relationships. But you touched upon something that's pretty interesting. You also mentioned that a typical VC, or not a typical, but a high quality VC could also be, you know, a little bit more of an introvert, and could be a little bit more kind of you know, a little bit more bookish, whatever that might be. So how would that play into it if someone, and you know, I meet and I hear from a lot of people who feel like they contribute a lot to their companies, but they're not necessarily loud. They don't necessarily ask for the praise. They don't necessarily promote themselves, and they don't necessarily go out and like cold email people or do the coffee rounds, or, you know, do all the networking. And they sometimes feel like they're being left behind in some aspects. How does that play into VC if you kind of don't go out and do a lot of like the handshaking? Could that, do you maybe play a different role if that's the case, or you grow into that? Or I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, a few things. So number one, Sonny and I joke about this all the time. So I'm a closeted introvert. I know you guys don't believe me, but I really am. Like in the Myers-Briggs, I like lean introvert. I'm somewhere in the middle, but I lean introvert. But Sonny and I always joke that, like, you know, we're working with a team full of introverts. So you can't be an introvert and be successful in the role, right? Like, you know, because there is more than just like getting out there in the world. You know, there is the pick, you know, so like you got to be deeply analytical. You know, you got to also have, you know, if you're working with a portfolio, it's often in a one-on-one setting, which is perfect for introverts, by the way. So like, you know, so you don't need to be extroverted. Having said that, you know, and I talk to my team about this all the time, which is, you know, for founders to learn about Spero Ventures, you know, to come to us, you know, and you know, and give us the privilege of possibly investing in their companies, we do have to like build that muscle and get out there into the world, right? And like develop our thesis, but then also publish our thesis, you know, participate in events, speak, etc. And so you can be an introvert and learn how to build that muscle. And honestly, I think you do need to build that muscle, right? If you're going to be successful, at least at part of the venture role, not everything, like, you know, like the other two things of like the deal picking and the portfolio support. You can be introverted all you want, and that's perfectly fine. But for the deal flow, sourcing, brand building, I do think you just have to build that muscle.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. You know, what's embedded in your question is clicks and bubbles, right? When I think about maybe traditional VC, it was, you know, as Ha described in our first example, it was who you knew, you know, were you groomed for it, you know, was it legacy, you know, kind of a click. And I think what's been happening, especially the last 5 years, is that, and I think for the better, by the way, that there's an amazing talent that lives outside of Silicon Valley. There's amazing talent outside of New York. You know, my company was based in Lake Charles, Louisiana, who probably no one on here has ever even heard of. It's a city of 70,000 people. And there's people there. I'm picturing, you know, our analytics person. I'm picturing our head of software, actually, and our chief architect. I mean, incredible talents that have built companies at scale, are very young, incredibly smart, and probably would really do good at some point getting into VC. Well, one of them, my friend Travis Boudreau, actually head of software, is starting to participate. So he's joined a syndicate. He's and that's really the key. Is it's about starting to participate. If you stay invisible, how can anyone know about you? What I think is happening is maybe people outside the bubble are starting to participate a little more. And that doesn't mean building a massive personal brand. It's about participating and building relationships. And I think, Silicon Valley is looking outside of the valley a little bit more. And the more we can do that, the more we can create a global ecosystem and surface super talented people that wouldn't have otherwise had the chance to get into VC.
That's really great. I appreciate that. And also, I actually appreciate what Ha said, that it may not be innate for everyone to just be the super networker, but it's something you grow and improve at and just probably slowly get more comfortable and then realize over time, oh, hey, it's not that big of a deal for me to send a cold email to this person or get coffee with this person who I don't know because I've done 50 of them already. It's totally fine. But those first, I've noticed when some people haven't done that before, getting them to do that first 1 or 2 or 3 can be like pulling teeth, because in their head, they're like, what if this person doesn't want to get coffee? What if the big thing I hear from a lot of people, well, I don't want to bug that person. Well, all right. Well, that mentality is going to really hold you back.
And it's just one thing to just to sort of lob into that though.
Mm-hmm.
So don't think about like any coffee or any relationship that you try to build, as like bugging somebody. In fact, like the mindset that you should have is like, how can I add value to this person? Like however I can, right? Like, so one way to add value is just educate them and make them smarter about something that better than they do, right? Like that is, that's going to go a long way, right? Too, like be a nice, kind, genuine human being, like somebody who like they, would love to grab beers with, right? Like, and so if you shift that dynamic, which is like, hey, I might be an introvert, but like I have knowledge, expertise, a network. I have, I am who I am. I bring something of value to this world, and I'm going to help the person on the other side, with something, that shifts that dynamic and hopefully like gets you out of your own head. And that's what people are looking for, right? They're looking for like authentic, genuine human connection, and hopefully like a give and take, not just a give relationship.
Yeah. And I've generally had this thesis for a while, and I'd love to hear if you guys either agree or disagree. But that your relationships and the relationships you consistently go after and build and grow will actually take you a lot farther in any career than expertise or knowledge. Now that might be bold, going on one area, and discounting the other, but it is something I have seen in other people who've grown rapidly. It's based off of who they know and who I guess the trust that they've created within communities. And it speaks to, one of the questions we have in the chat here about, what is the best way to double click into building analytical deal picking muscle, and how do you understand investment theses? What are good examples of communities to be plugged into? I think those are all great things to learn, but if you don't have the network and you don't get opportunities based off of your network, and if you haven't learned how to build relationships, you're probably not going to get into the situation where you're even in a place to have an investment thesis. I would say that's a great question to ask as you're getting those opportunities. But if you want to be in that situation, you've got to really start meeting people like Ha, like Sonny, and get out of your comfort zone.
Just one very tactical piece of advice, honestly, like, if you don't feel comfortable going out and speaking, right, or even writing right now, you haven't built that muscle yet. I mean, I strongly encourage you, put aside 5 hours of your week. And I think everybody can put aside 5 hours, right? And just reach out to people and see if they would grab coffee. Maybe you'll start with like people you haven't connected with in quite a while, right? But like who you've admired, who's been your mentor, maybe an old boss, like reconnect with them, tell them what you want, ask for their help. And then at the end of the conversation, say like, hey, given what I told you, like, is there somebody that, in your network that you think I should connect with? Like, and ask them to do that intro for you, right? And if you do 5 of those coffee sessions every week for a year, you are going to build that network. And it was easy. It was a one-on-one, right? Like, even if you're an introvert, it was a one-on-one conversation that was a genuine connection, between you and that other person. So.
Absolutely. And you never know who that person on the other end is going to be, and what they could potentially help you out with, and how you could potentially help them out with some level of karma. A story I frequently tell is roughly half of our New York business is literally based off one person. I cold emailed one person, grabbed coffee with him. He's driven a significant amount of introductions and new business for us. And all it took was one cold email. And of course, I've sent 4 other cold emails to people who never responded. But you know, when you look at that overall story, if I would have gotten discouraged by not getting a response or getting, you know, quote unquote rejected, I would have never met that 5th person. So yeah.
And I think you and I met that way, right? Like we're part of the Greylock Growth community. And I think I had responded to somebody's email, and then you reached out, or maybe your email. Then you reached out. I was like, oh, hey, like I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. You seem kind of like a cool gal, you know, like, hey, let's grab coffee. And I was like, you know, of course I'm going to say yes. So like we grabbed coffee, we hit it off, and look at like, you know, what we've kind of collaborated on together since. Sonny was the same way, actually. So Sonny, I don't know if he shared the story of how we met, but Sonny was managing director at Launch, which is Jason Calacanis's Launch accelerator. He was part of the judging panel. I was part of the judging panel. Like afterwards, like me being my closeted introvert, all I wanted to do after sort of judging the accelerator pitches was pack up my bags and like leave, just so I wouldn't have to talk to anybody. And then Sonny came up to me and was like, hey, you know, I like your questions, and you know, I'd love to get to know you, and let's just exchange emails and hop on a Zoom. And that's what we did. And there you go. Here we are. Now we're friends and we are work colleagues. So you just never know. Got to put yourself out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that, yeah, I hope if anyone takes anything away from this, if you are looking to get into a position like Ha or Sonny, you need to meet people, because people are the ones who give you opportunities. You know, you might have read every book on earth about how to do the job or studied a ton of investment theses, but if you don't know someone like them to give you that opportunity, it's going to be difficult. And also when you talk, the biggest thing I've learned also is I've learned a lot more from one-on-one conversations than reading what people post publicly, because what people post publicly, let's say through their blog or a book, is often a very filtered version of the truth. And very often when you're able to get a one-on-one with someone at a coffee shop, they'll tell you what the real story was. And you'll learn a lot about how the sausage is made within a lot of industries. Because obviously if there was an ugly side to that truth, a lot of people are very sensitive about that information getting out. But you'll be surprised how insensitive people are. Insensitive is the wrong word, but how you know, how open people are when you get them one-on-one, and they'll just spill the beans. So if you're trying to learn how something works, of course, sure, read what people post, but do really, you know, if you find someone whose work you really enjoy, or, you know, whose perspective or career you really respect, really try to get them in a one-on-one conversation, because you'll learn a lot more of the real story there, and that can help guide your sort of path as well. Oh, interesting. What is one area and market opportunity you're looking at now that you are bullish on, but feel that is not talked about enough? What's that secret kind of industry you're investing in that nobody knows, and that you're going to tell everybody about so they can go and chase after it as well?
Okay, I guess I'm going to take that one, unless you want to, Sonny. So we, first of all, let me just start with sharing a little bit more about our investment areas at Spero Ventures. So we say that we invest in the things that make life worth living, and it's founders who are working on amazing startups in 3 core areas. The first is well-being, so that's health of people on the planet. The second is work and purpose, and that's investments in the future of work and upskilling. And then third is human connection. And that's tech that brings people together. And in that third bucket, and so I'm going to answer the question here, we have spent a lot of time looking at sort of our investment thesis in human connection. And what we've come up with is this concept of product-led communities, which we developed our thesis. We put it out there. So if you're interested, you could Google and look up Spero Ventures product-led communities. And then the idea behind that is that we believe that amazing opportunities are going to be found when you're building a product or service that's 10 times better than existing product and services that are out there, but that you wrap a community layer around it, right? And that community helps to improve themselves through your product, but then also helps each other. And so the classic example, honestly, is like Peloton, right? Like Peloton is an exercise bike and it has cool instructors, but there's a community layer that you kind of feel like when you're riding the bike and even outside of your exercise experience, right? And so that's, sort of the notion of a product-led community. We think that there's really, really cool opportunities for investment there. We're excited. If you're building a product-led community, we want to talk to you. And then related to that thesis, we think that there's picks and shovels opportunities, for platforms who are enabling communities, for other startups. And you're providing the tools and the infrastructure. That's super exciting for us too. And so I mentioned that one in particular because I don't think very many VCs are talking about it. And in fact, like when we published our thesis around it, people were like, oh, more VCs should be looking at this area. And so we've been able to get a bunch of founders who are building awesome startups in this area to come talk to us and build the relationships early. So.
Awesome.
Yeah. And yeah, that's so awesome. And kind of honing into another perspective too, one thing that I'm actually really intrigued on is, which fits right into this, is how AR and VR are going to affect work and purpose. So I think this is something I'm pretty bullish on, that I think I don't know if it's not been talked about. I think it's probably been talked about a ton, but I do believe that what we're seeing, and COVID-19 is actually accelerating some of this. We're going to see 16-year-olds of today function very differently than 30-year-olds function when they get into, call it, mainstream society. So how they interview for jobs, how they build relationships with people, and maybe even how they actually get work done and get projects created. And I think a lot of that's going to be driven by AR and VR. So I think that's an interesting one. Do
you have any examples of companies who are sort of already on that path, or who you're seeing doing a good job of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say Zoom, but that's kind of seems like an obvious answer. I don't know that I looked at a young startup. I can't quite remember the name right now, but they're essentially were doing virtual reality conferences, and with like full avatars and this really incredible 3-dimensional interface. And it was interestingly timed, right? I think I looked at this, I don't know, 2 months ago, and forgive me for not remembering the name of the company, but and it's a company in market right now, and essentially it'd be like, so let's say we all went to Launch Festival as a conference, right? In real life, you'd go to, the Piers, Chrissy Field in San Francisco, and there'd be the startup pit, and then the main stage, and then the small stage, right? Like all the tech conferences we've all been to. So they've sort of taken that and given you, in the networking area, the press area, they've created that in VR, right? And then you're living it in real time. So I think we're starting to see those types of things. I've also seen some companies that are doing, job interviews remotely through AR and VR. I mean, I think those types of things are going to be really cool.
So Sonny, are you kind of talking about like a second life for like work and collaboration? Is that kind of part of the vision there?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I think it's going to go deeper into fall under the picks and shovels platform that Ha was talking about in enablement tools. But what I see, what I'm bullish about, is it's going to change the way that we've typically done things, right? So when I interviewed at Facebook, you interview on VC, which is pretty standard these days, and then you go in for face-to-face interviews, with 4 different people, and you get ranked and rated, and the typical process. I think job interviews are going to be very different. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to look, but I think they're going to be different. And I think that can go into, I mean, jobs are a lot of the way we spend our time, right? It's maybe a third of your time or maybe more. Or if you're HA, it's like 90% of your time. But on pumps. But, you know, yeah, I don't know if it's full on Second Life, but I think it's going to affect different elements in the way we do things in our life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the process of getting through a job interview, obviously that's something we're intimately kind of like dealing with right now in terms of how fast or how slow a process goes. I think there's going to be a lot of tools to speed up that whole process and get candidates from the beginning to the end a lot more rapidly, or have either side realize that particular candidate is not a fit. There's already companies kind of doing initial 5-minute video interviews right after someone fills out an application online, just which helps kind of hear someone clarify their thoughts. So little steps like that, I can imagine, are going to have, I think, have a pretty decent impact on operationally and efficient in terms of efficiency. So we are actually over now, about 9 minutes. I don't know how you guys feel. Are you guys kind of a little tight on time right now? I'm sure I totally understand if some of the audience wants to sort of move on to their next thing. Let me know any of your thoughts.
Yeah, so just Anish, just to, yes, I think I can do another 10 minutes. My husband's been calling me. Saying, call me. So probably let's do another 10 minutes of questions from the chat. And then I just want to offer up, if your question doesn't get answered or if you have to jump off now, which is no problem, shoot me or Sonny an email. We would be happy to answer your question also via email.
Great, and we'll put all of our emails in the chat here as well. So someone can have access for all of us. Great, let's jump on to the next question. Or actually, sorry, you mentioned taking questions from the chat.
Yeah, that'd be good. Let's do some of these people who spent their valuable time joining us, and we can answer some of their questions.
Okay, great. So as VCs, you also have to manage up. What conversations are you having with your LPs? Here's an interesting one. Have you ever had to fire an LP or investor, or have you ever wanted to?
Okay, I think Cynthia asked that question, right?
Yes.
Okay, Cynthia, I think you might know the answer to this one. So Spero Ventures is a little bit unique in that we only have a sole LP. That LP is Pierre Omidyar, who's the founder of eBay, who made his billions and wants to deploy his wealth to making the world better. So he has investments in a couple dozen probably different entities, Spero Ventures being one of his entities that then goes out and invests in awesome purpose-driven companies on Pierre's behalf. So we're a little bit different, or actually very different than 99% of venture firms, in that we don't have to go out and raise from other LPs, or LPs being limited partners who would be investors in fund managers. And we don't have to do that. And the nice thing is that Pierre is completely mission and values aligned with Spero and our ethos. So there's never been a conflict, which is nice.
Okay, awesome. Let me see. There's a question here about what is the range of deal terms between an EIR and a VC firm? I'm sure that could go a million different directions with every single deal and with everyone's unique agreement with their firm. But I think he's just sort of looking for any sort of idea how that even works.
Sorry, is the deal, by deal terms, you mean like compensation, or whoever asked the question, if you want to unmute and just clarify.
Sure, yeah, I asked the question. Yeah, I was interested to hear more about the structure. And I know, like he said, it can range, I'm sure, from one VC firm and one EIR relationship to another, but sense for like compensation, or like, is it like a percentage of deals brought in?
Got it. Okay, so yeah, so specifically compensation. Okay, got it. Let me take this one. So Sonny, is on stipend with us, so, and I promise you, he could be working anywhere else and be making 5 to 10 times as much. So he's certainly not here for the comp, but he is sort of stipend. And that's typically an EIR role, is what I've seen is, it is a stipend role. So kind of like this flat thing. You could be making a lot more by, being an executive at even early mid-stage startup, but you're at the venture firm for other reasons. Sometimes it comes with benefits, sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes it'll come with like business cards and other perks. Let's say if you're full-time at a venture firm, and let's just talk about partner roles for a second. It is a combination of salary and what's called carry or carried interest in the fund. And what carried interest is that you will collect a percentage of the net profits that are generated from investments that you make in the fund, minus any expenses that you incurred over the 10-year life of the fund, and minus obviously the investment capital that you put into your startups, right? So you put $50 million of capital into various startups. You also generated fees. The fees are 2% every year, to pay for your salaries and office space and travel and events and parties. That 2% also gets deducted. So like say over the course of 10 years, that was $5 million, let's say, so if you invested 50 million, you generated 100 million, but there was 5 million of expenses over the course of 10 years, the profits of 45 million, 80%, there's this 80-20 rule, 80% will go back to the LPs or the investors in the fund of that 45 million in net profits. And then 20% will get split among the partners of the firm. So there's something in venture called power law, where like, if we got say 45 million in net profits split between me and my 4 partners, that's nice. We could probably buy a house in, Martha's Vineyard or Napa or whatever, but we certainly can't buy our jet and our yacht. And so there is something called power laws where we're looking for not just, to return 2x or 3x the fund, but hopefully 5 or 10 or 20x the fund by investing in that outlier company, the Zoom, the Slacks, the Facebooks of the world, and that's where all of the wealth is created.
Awesome. Thanks for that answer right there. And I actually had never heard of power law before, so that's really good. So circling back to the very beginning of the chat, both Ha and Sonny had offered to take meetings with any founders within the Black or Latino communities. So their email address is there, and because they specifically want to help those underrepresented founders be able to get more access, and hopefully, even if they're not the ones to write the check, they could potentially introduce you to the person who will write the check. And our organization would love to help that population as well get better jobs. So if you yourself are a hiring manager who's looking to grow your team and really want to help, bringing folks who are part of those communities, specifically the Black and Latinx communities, we would love to be able to support you with more of that, more of those people who could fill in your team. And then on the other side, maybe if you are part of those communities and you are having trouble getting a job or would like to get into tech and don't know how, my email address is there for both of those situations, and we'll do our best with that. With that, I really want to thank both Ha and Sonny for joining us here. They've given more than their allotted amount of time, and so they've been with us for over an hour, asked a ton of questions, and if there's any closing thoughts, feel free. But this has been amazing, and I've learned a ton.
Yeah, my closing thought is that, feel free to connect with Sonny and I, LinkedIn, Twitter, email. Love to hear from you. And I think I convinced Anish to send out a Net Promoter Score survey sometime after this, hopefully before the end of the day, to collect feedback, because I'm a big fan of listening to your customer and improving by learning how we can do things better. So please do fill that out.
Please be as honest
That's
as
classic.
possible.
That's classic Ha. She is NPS obsessed, and it's good stuff. So thanks for doing that, Anish. Closing thoughts. I want to thank you and Grace and the team at Bring Ruckus for having us. Really appreciate it. And to all you founders out there, never give up. Don't quit. Don't die. Keep going. It's hard. We've all been there. It's really hard, but you will get there. And to everybody else who's
that's true for non-founders too, right?
That's right. That's right. And for everybody else who's just out there doing it, don't give up, don't die, don't give in, keep going. It's really hard right now, but let's stay together. Let's get through this crazy time. Let's make this world a little bit better. And like Ha said, anybody doing anything awesome, anything great, shoot us an email. We'd love to know about it. So thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great week.